Welcome into Illini Inquirer After Dark. It is 11:34 as we start this on Saturday, September 2nd, as Illinois survives and they win. They are 1-0. Might not feel like it to everybody, but they overcome a 12-point third quarter deficit. They overcome a 1-point deficit with 2:59 remaining, and they beat Toledo 30-28 behind a really strong performance from first-time starter at Illinois, Luke Altmyer, 211 yards, 2 touchdowns. They have the 1 pick, but also ran for a team-leading 69 rushing yards. Miles Scott kind of flips the game with a pick six. Illinois down 19-7, and Miles Scott, the talk of training camp, comes up big, shows why he's earned, as we learned today, a scholarship. Brett Bielema doesn't comment on that stuff a lot, but Miles Scott is on scholarship, and that is deserved. Joey Wagner, Jeremy Werner, our producer Isaac Ambrose is going to join us here very shortly. Whew, Joey, take a breath. Illinois is 1-0, but there's some issues to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issues are the self-inflicted. We'll get to that, but to me, there's two stories. Luke Altmyer and penalties almost derailed what really should have been like that kind of feel-good start to the season for Illinois. It ended up being a win, but penalties made it really, really close.
Yeah, so let's talk about that to start. This had Indiana game written all over it. My preview the entire time was Illinois is better than Toledo. They're more talented. They should be better in the trenches. We'll get to that here in a second. But if they commit penalties, if they have self-inflicted errors, if they have a lot of turnovers, this could go really, really poorly. And they had 9 penalties for 90 yards in the first half. Led directly to 10 points in the first half, and then another touchdown to go ahead for Toledo late in the game with Gabe Akis with the roughing the passer penalty. So, 17 points? Those penalties led to for Toledo, really costly. 10 penalties for 100 yards. Felt like Indiana all over again, except Luke Altmyer comes up with some big throws. But that was the difference, Joey. Like, otherwise, this defense, they couldn't get off the field. That was the problem because of their penalties and then the conversions that Toledo had. And you do got to tip your cap to DeQuan Finn for some of those runs he had. He made some big plays for them. 7 of 15 on third down for Toledo, 2 of 2 on fourth down. Defense just couldn't get off the field. But a lot of that was self-inflicted, as you were talking about.
Yeah, we have to talk about that first because first drive for Toledo ends with the field goal. 3rd and 7, they get off the field. Treek Barnes, unsportsmanlike. I know there are some people have said we didn't see a replay. We didn't get a chance to ask Brett Bielema about it. So I don't know. I don't know if he said something, if he hit something, but that leads to 3 points. Miles Scott, 2 defensive pass interferences in 1 drive. That leads to points. The Gabe Akis hit. And then
was that Taz Nicholson?
I'm sorry, Taz Nicholson. Thank you. Yeah. It's been a long day. Taz Nicholson, 2, one of which he climbed, the wide receiver. I mean, that was as penalty as it gets. That leads to points. Gabe Akis, the late hit, the roughing the passer on that final play, or that final Toledo offensive drive, that leads to points. Like, those things add up. And then Illinois had an offensive drive that was taken back. There was a holding call. There was the false start. I mean, those things add up. And that's just – I don't know that we've seen very often 9 for 90 in the first half since Brett Bielema has been here. That I think it was an outlier, but it almost really, really got them. And if not for the quarterback, they went and found in the transfer portal.
It's what makes you nervous in these early games. You're going to be undisciplined. And against an FCS opponent, Illinois still probably blows them out, 50-10 or whatever it is. But Toledo's a good team, and Toledo didn't make as many mistakes. Toledo wasn't, the most efficient tonight. DeQuan Finn wasn't the best passer, though he had some great moments tonight. When he was in the pocket, he was, beatable, but they're a good football team, and they know how to win games, and they played really well. And kudos to Jason Candle and that crew. The other big concern, and we're going negative here first before we get into the real positives. Illinois got outplayed in the trenches.
At least in the first half.
Yeah, especially in the first half, but there's some moments late in that fourth quarter where they struggled a little bit there too. But yeah, that first half was a little bit alarming. Illinois interior offensive line struggled. That's not too surprising. Josh Kreutz and Josh Geske had some moments that weren't that great, but they just couldn't get that run game going. Barry Lunny goes 2 runs right up the gut, and it didn't work. And, play calling or whatever, like, you got to be able to rely on that. Like, your identity for Illinois has to be, you got to be more physical than Toledo. Go ahead, Joy.
Yeah, you mentioned Indiana. That was Indiana last year. Like the interior, Zy Chrysler, Alex Pihlstrom struggled at Indiana. Like there are very parallel things between this game and that Indiana game other than the outcome.
It felt like Indiana. Like that's like my big takeaway from this entire game. Except you found a way to win the game. I thought they got better in the second half. I thought they were more physical. I saw some really good blocks off the middle. Jordan Slaughter played more in the second half, which I thought was very notable. We should note Zy Chrysler and Isaiah Adams both suffered injuries in this game. Brett Bielema said he doesn't think they're serious. They're going to have to do some follow-ups to figure all that out, but that was a concern. It certainly the offensive line did not play great tonight, but they did end up with 4.7 yards per carry. And towards the end of the game, I thought the offensive line really settled in. The 2 sacks they gave up on the one drive certainly hurt, but I thought that last drive after the great Casey Washington catch from Luke Altmyer, after that one, they had some big runs to get that within field goal range for Caleb Griffin. My bigger concern was what happened to the defensive front tonight? They weren't good. Like Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph weren't big difference makers except for a couple drives in the second half. Denzel Daxon, I thought, had some struggles, especially in the first half. And the outside linebackers lost contain a lot. Gabe Akis with that penalty. I'm not worried about the sacks as much in this game because you're trying to contain DeQuan Finn, but they didn't contain DeQuan Finn and those are your guys. Like you got to be able to really rely on that defensive front, and you couldn't tonight. And I thought the secondary was pretty good tonight. The defensive front was the concern.
Yeah, I do wonder how much of that was balanced for trying to contain DeQuan Finn versus what are we going to see at Kansas. I mean, if it's Jalen Daniels, the same, you got to contain him. So that was a concern because that was the narrative this offseason, right? Like, hey, whatever the changes around this team, and there were substantial changes defensively. You lose your quarterback, you lose Chase Brown. We've talked about all of it for months, Jeremy. But the narrative was, hey, they've got these lines. And they settled in, but it wasn't what we thought, I guess, early on. And you do wonder, first game, I don't think anyone should say right off the lines, but we thought this was going to be like this, like, bully deal. And they had moments, but they also had moments where it's like, oh, that's not what we thought we'd see.
Yeah. I'm not too concerned about Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph for this season.
No.
I would probably be more concerned about Gabe Akis and Seth Coleman struggling a little bit tonight because those guys still have to take their game up another level for this team. So Charlie Bowen and that crew, I'm interested to see how they bounce back. But the linebackers were solid. There was probably some moments in the first half. Toledo's offensive line was really physical tonight. They impressed me. I really like Jason Candle's play calling with their movement about what they were doing up front, but I just expected them to own in the trenches, and they didn't. Toledo outran Illinois 186 yards, 163. I thought Reggie Love had a good second half. Luke Altmyer was great with his legs, but that was a little bit more of a concern than I thought it would be. Let's dive into it, Joey. Big positive from this game. Luke Altmyer had one throw he'd like to have back, right? That was a bad throw in a triple coverage that he forced. We expect that stuff from a first-time starter trying to figure all this stuff out. Probably got excited they were taking a deep shot. Otherwise, he was fantastic. Him and DeQuan Finn maybe evened out at the end of this game, but I thought Luke Altmyer looked like the best player in the field for most of this game. 18 of 26, 211 yards, 2 touchdowns, 9 carries, 69 yards. He looked like a former 4-star prospect that had a chance to start at Ole Miss last year and a guy that we thought could be a dynamic playmaker. He looked comfortable, confident, poised. That throw to Casey Washington, which was not blocked well, in the face of pressure to throw that up and give Casey Washington a chance, that's big-time stuff. And the way he uses legs, I think we tried to talk about how excited Barry Lunny is about his running ability, but that showed tonight because he was the best thing they had going on the ground.
Yeah, I don't know if it's ideal that he would lead the team in rushing every game, but if I would have told you that was his first career start against an FBS, like you wouldn't have believed it. He looked very settled. He looked very poised. That was kind of the talk after the game, was that final drive that he was just kind of had the control. And everyone just kind of, look, when we said it, dude, when a guy makes throws, people get on board. It's really not rocket science, right? Make some throws, people are going to buy into it. But I don't know. It's kind of hard to put it into words because like his passes had so much zip. Like he confidently used the middle of the field, trusted his guys, Isaiah Williams, Pat Bryant, Casey Washington. He looked like a guy. There was the one pass, but he looked like a guy who had done this before.
I tweeted out at one point, it's time to let him cook. And the next play, he threw the interception. But his decision-making outside of that one play was great. It was fantastic. I was really encouraged by his decision-making. So I don't know what the PFF grades are going to be, but I thought the quarterback, he had the highest grade of anybody on this team. And I will say this, Joey, I thought his receivers made plays. You know, Pat Bryant said after the game, I wish we could have stretched the field a little bit more, but Pat Bryant, 6 catches, 64 yards, 2 touchdowns. I love the play call Barry Lunny had for him for his first touchdown. Isaiah Williams, 5 catches, 51 yards. Casey Washington, 4 for 54. Tip Ryman got involved, 2 catches, 33 yards. I think both those in the first quarter. So you only had 5 people catch a pass in this. So maybe the wide receiver room didn't go as deep as I thought, but those starters I thought performed extremely well.
Well, they still dug into a little bit of the depth. Malik Elsley had one. We can get into that later. He had one snap, I think. One snap, one target. Luke Altmyer looked for him the whole way, by the way. Ashton Hollins was out there. Hank Beatty. So in terms of production, like you're talking about catches, no, but like they did dive into a little bit of that. I'm curious how much more.
Not as much as I thought it would be.
Yeah, I'm with you. There was a lot. We should get into that later about the rotations and what we kind of expected and what we saw. But yeah, we thought this wide receiver room was better. Like I think tonight showed that. Pat Bryant, they're really talking about him as somebody here, and it seems like he and Luke Altmyer have taken a pretty fast connection, and they look good together. Casey Washington was the guy who early on, when Luke Altmyer got here, was kind of that put his arm around you. Hey, you're gonna, I'm gonna be your guy here, and we're gonna welcome you in here. Casey Washington means a lot to that locker room, and he means a lot to Luke Altmyer.
Phenomenal hands. Phenomenal hand. Like, not an explosive player, but Casey's a hell of a blocker, and just he catches whatever is next to him. Like,
can we bring anything?
Go for it.
It's 2019. It's freshman year. He'd stay after training camp, pour one out for open training camps, and he would just put on this like spectacle catching the ball. It's like, dang, dude, you can really catch it, and just kind of been a slow build for him. I think that's the best way to put it with Casey Washington. It's just been a slow build, and he's a really reliable. I think he's a really reliable receiver. We've talked about the things he doesn't do exceptionally, but he's really reliable, and Luke Altmyer trusts him, and I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, Reggie Love, 58 yards on 11 carries or 12 carries. That's about what I expect from Reggie. I expect him to be productive. At that one long run of 29 yards, but had a couple key ones in that second half. Josh McCray took a while to get going. Had the touchdown run. That's a lot of value when you can actually have a guy that can plunge in from 1 yard. But struggled in that first half. Got going a little bit late. A couple key runs late. But just 2.7 yards per carry on 11 attempts for 30 yards. No other running back got into that rotation. So they trust those two guys. But I thought more of the problems were up front. I thought there was one run Reggie Love got a one-on-one with a safety. Maybe Chase Brown breaks that one. I thought that was the difference of not having Chase Brown. But I think Reggie Love can be productive with good blocking. Josh McCray, need your interior to perform better because he was getting hit in the backfield quite a bit.
Yeah, interior of the offensive line. Again, I go back to Indiana. I think the staff has earned the benefit of the doubt that those guys they'll play better moving forward. If not, I don't know what the depth options are there. But yeah, that's what I thought out of Reggie Love. Like, I think ideally, if you're Illinois, you get a 90-60 out of those guys, some kind of variation of it. They didn't run the ball very effectively in this game beyond Luke Altmyer, and that's something that I don't think you and I necessarily saw coming.
I thought Luke Altmyer would help the run game. I've been making that bold claim of this team could actually be a better rushing team, and I think Altmyer's a big part of that. I didn't think he'd lead the team in rushing, but I think he can be a guy that can give you 30, 40 yards, a positive carries, and sacks will probably get taken out of that. Like, think about that. Sacks got taken out of that today for Luke Altmyer, right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
And he still gets 69 yards. Nice rushing. I thought the secondary was good. There's some moments, Aaron Henry, I think, played a lot of zone early on from what I was watching. I'll have to go back and watch some of the film, but a lot of zone early. And, Toledo's taking a little bit of advantage of that and getting some of these nickel and dime things. But I thought they went more man and got more aggressive in their pressure packages early in the second half. And I think that made a big difference after that initial scoring drive. And I thought those guys played pretty well. I mean, the two guys they've hyped up, Xavier Scott with 2 pass breakups, played really well, played both nickel and the boundary corner after Tyler Strain suffered a concussion. They moved Xavier Scott back out. Elijah McCantos came in. Thought he was solid. There was a couple of times one-on-one he got beat, but he did make some plays. And then Miles Scott with the game-changing interception, almost had another one. Miles Scott in that free safety spot. Illinois earned some trust when they hype up some DBs, is what I'm saying now. With Quan Martin last year and now those two tonight, the Scott guys played pretty well. So I thought the DBs were pretty encouraging for the most part.
I'm just waiting for Brett Bielema to Scott's tots this thing. I guess Miles Scott might be a little too old for that. Xavier Scott. At any rate, but real quick, I think Luke Altmyer is rushing that. He had 69 after 3, and he got sacked twice in the 4th. So I don't know. He still got 69. Anyway, I mean, it's neither here nor there. It's your crusade against stats, counting his rushing yards. Yeah, the secondary. Taz Nicholson had some moments there. Those pass interferences were poorly timed, right? Gets up celebrating after he goes. Like the flag almost hits him in the head. Like, that was a flag. But the Scott guys, man, I thought they played a good football game. Miles Scott, similar to like we said with Luke Altmyer, that you wouldn't have thought this was his first like real start.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have believed that Miles Scott moved to defensive back in the spring. Like the way it wasn't similar to Indiana was he didn't have those breaks that Kendall Smith had early in that first half of Indiana. Like Miles Scott kept things in front of him. Now, it helps that DeQuan Finn leaves a little bit to be desired accuracy-wise on some of those throws. But, yeah, that secondary still got to see more, right? I think that's fair. But that was a pretty good first impression for what we just thought was a question mark.
Yeah, taking it into the press box a little bit, we were watching DeQuan Finn, turn some of those. Here's the thing. Toledo, they were getting first down yardage consistently.
That was the key.
That was setting up a second down, and we can take a chance, which Toledo didn't hit on a lot of those. But you set up DeQuan Finn for a 3rd and 6, he can run for it. It's just hard to contain that. Like, he's a good playmaker. And we were talking in the press box, like, he's got a lot of A.J. Bush to him.
I love that comp. That was a good comp.
A lot of A.J. Bush of, it's hard to stop a guy that's that slippery, that athletic. He's got some size to him. So kudos to him. But you got him sitting in the pocket. That's when, you could contain him a little bit. And sometimes you make mistakes. And it's when he finally got off the field. But he's a good player. Toledo's got some good players on offense. I thought their offensive line looks good. I think that team's going to win the MAC. Definitely go to the MAC championship game. So that's a good team with some good players, but Illinois shooting itself in the foot is why they had to sweat this one out.
Yeah, I wonder what would have happened if there was one offensive. Obviously, you mentioned the 17 points. I wonder what would have happened if they don't get in the way. It's just not characteristic. Like we've covered teams, Jeremy, that is characteristic. Mm-hmm. That wasn't what we've seen from Brett Bielema coach teams here. So I'm wondering that gets corrected going into Kansas on Friday night.
Yeah, it's just watching the film, and I think it's just playing. It's early in the season. I think you just got to play some of these games, and you deal with it. But when you got a team like Toledo, that's what makes this game so difficult. This is the first game. Like you wish Fort Atlantic, who still could have probably given Illinois a game tonight, but you wish you had a easier opponent, an Akron or an FCS opponent that you can deal with some of those things, learn from it, feel comfortable, never feel threatened. But I don't know if you learn more or if you feel better about learning from a close win. But boy, to actually win the game rather than what happened at Indiana, I think you learn from both of them. But I think that's monstrous for Illinois, just for confidence going in on the road at Kansas. It's just going to be similarly talented than Toledo. I know Kansas is not fully where it wants to be yet, but that's an explosive offense with Power 5 players, and it's going to be a huge test. So it's going to be a big jump in 6 days.
Yeah, I mean, let's just say it. Like Toledo scores that touchdown, and you're doing the math in your head. It's like, okay, if Illinois doesn't score, it's 4th and 4, and Luke Altmyer throws a prayer to Casey Washington that comes down, and you're going through your mind. It's like, okay, if they lose this game, Kansas is a difficult game that I know you pick Kansas to win, and then Penn State, and all of a sudden you're 3 weeks into this, and like that could get a little hairy. Like I think just having the confidence of going out there and squeaking out a win that I don't want to say they didn't deserve to win because Luke Altmyer sure as heck did. He looked pretty freaking good. But that changes a little bit of the tenor of these first 3 weeks just still, obviously, you got to see what happens. But man, didn't take you long to go down the rabbit hole of what it could have looked like if that 4th and 4 pass falls incomplete.
All right, let's bring in our producer, Isaac Ambrose. Isaac, let's get some of these questions on the live YouTube. We got plenty of people, 250 plus people here at almost midnight. Love it. Love you crazies, you sickos. So Isaac, go through some of these listener submitted questions, comments. Go for it, man.
Yeah, I think the biggest one that stands out to me, I don't think you guys have really touched on yet. And being at the stadium, it was a little bit hard to keep track of who was running on and off the field, especially on the defensive side. Joseph Player, sorry, I might have butchered your last name. I like McCanto's performance today. Yes, he got beat a couple times, but for playing his first major action, made plays, I like it. So I think there was multiple guys getting their first action tonight. So curious your guys' takes on McCantos and the rest of the new guys.
Yeah, we were trying to figure out who was next in that secondary. I do wonder if Tyson Rooks would have been next, if he would have been next at nickel. Brett Bielema mentioned him. He was out this game. But I did think it was notable that Xavier Scott kicked out to boundary. I thought that was something to circle. I know that's not exactly the question about McCantos, but I thought he played fine. Like, he did have some mistakes in the same way that Tyler Strain had mistakes a year ago and Xavier Scott. Like, I think it's really hard to circle just how difficult it is being a freshman or a redshirt freshman getting your first significant. Like, that just takes time. But I did him going out there was interesting to me, and just kind of the mini reshuffling that they did back there. And Jim, I'll let you hit on that before. There's one other point I'd like to bring up if we're talking defensive backs after you go.
Yeah, I thought it was noticeable who came in first. It was Elijah McCantos and Zachary Toby, freshman Zachary Toby, who was here in the spring. I thought it was notable when we saw a spring scrimmage. He was second team ahead of Caleb Patterson, ahead of some other guys who have been here for a little bit. I do think Tyson Rooks probably would have played that nickel if he would have came in, and Elijah McCantos maybe would have played corner. But getting those guys some reps is important. But that's what I find interesting is just who comes in first. But I do think one of the most interesting things, we were talking about it in the first half, was they were playing their backup defensive linemen a lot. And Brett was asked about it after the game, and I'm glad he was, because Johnny and Keith played so many reps last year, and they were so productive. But towards the end of the game, sometimes they could struggle because they were just gassed. I mean, they're human, even though they're NFL draft prospects. We saw a lot of T.R. Edwards coming in. We saw a lot of Bryce Barnes, senior. I thought he had played pretty well tonight. We saw a lot of Ced McConnell, and I don't know if those guys did great because the defensive line, I thought, struggled for most of the night, but they are more intense on keeping Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph fresh late in games, Joey.
Yeah, I thought that was telling. There especially on third down. There were some third downs where those two weren't out there, and I thought that is a choice. And I wonder if that's going to carry over into Kansas. I know there's a lot of value in keeping those two fresh because I think Brett Bielema has searched high and low this offseason about that ending of the season. I know it's eating at him, but all signs point the way he talked about it, that ending eats at him. And I think he dove in to literally everything. And I think defensive line snaps, he mentioned that tonight specifically to try to maybe manage those a little bit earlier on in the season rather than late. I also want to point out, we had talked, we didn't know what the rotation, like we should also talk about the rotations because it was kind of presented to us that there would be a safety rotation, especially at that boundary safety. Have to look at the PFF stats, but I sure thought Clayton Bush played an awful lot of those snaps.
I thought Scott and Bush played all the snaps. I want
to look at that, but that wasn't what we thought. And until Zy Chrysler went down, I think he was cramps. I know, Isaac, you highlighted a question about Isaiah Adams. Brett Bielema mentioned something with his knee, but we saw him walk off the field. He looked fine. But the point being, like before those two, there wasn't really that much rotation on the offensive line either. And I thought that's what I wondered coming in was how they were going to do that. And we didn't see the rotations that it was maybe on the defensive line. Like we saw in places I don't know that we circled as much, the defensive line in particular.
Yeah, I thought we saw more on the defensive line getting rotated and less at places I thought we would. Wide receiver. Like, I don't think there were a ton. Like, I know Ashton Hollins played a little bit. Hank Beatty played a little bit. Blake Elsie played just a tad. Those starters were in for most of the game. There was not a ton of 12 personnel. And it was mostly Henry Boyer. This is second tight end. Tip Ryman played almost every snap, but Henry Boyer played most of the backup snaps. Didn't see Griffin Moore really.
He got out there in that fourth quarter late.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then, linebackers rotate a little bit, but I'm pretty sure Dylan Rosiak played a lot more than Kanena Odeluga tonight. And Rosiak
He was
led
a
the team.
spy.
Yeah. He led the
It
team
looked
in
like he was
tackles.
spying. Yeah.
Yeah. And
With running back, too.
Yeah, running back, just two guys. So I thought, when games are tight, they talk all about rotating, but when games are tight, you keep in who you trust. And that certainly was the case tonight, except for the defensive line.
Yeah,
Isaac, what else you got?
Yeah, we've had a lot of questions about the offensive line and injuries, so I kind of want to probably clump this into a two-parter. First off, from the most part, it sounds like nothing super concerning injury-wise on either side of the ball. So if you guys want to touch on that, and then also where do you think Bielema goes if Adams or Chrysler or somebody has to miss time next week?
Yeah, the guy I would be concerned about is Tyler Strain. If he had a concussion, 6 days out from a game, I doubt he would be available for the next one. Zach Chrysler left, then came back in, but then he was out on the last series. They moved Josh Geske to right tackle. Zach Barlev came in the game for the first time in that last drive at right guard. They had Kreutz at center, obviously Jordan Slaughter at left guard. If either of those guys had to miss a game, it depends on who's available. The way they were walking after the game, it felt like they would be available. Brett Bielema will probably know more on Monday. I doubt he'll tell us very much. But we did learn a little bit about how they'll move around this offensive line. And when Chrysler got hurt, Isaiah Adams bumped out to right tackle. Jordan Slaughter came in at left guard. Josh Geske stayed at right guard, but we did see Geske get replaced at a time for Jordan Slaughter. So Slaughter gives you that experience and versatility at both those guard positions. Barlev can play center or guard. That's your top seven, right? You figured out your top seven tonight was Slaughter and Barlev are the first options. I would imagine Hunter Whitenack would be next up of that group with Brandon Henderson, the freshman, behind him, Joey.
Yeah, that's exactly what I think. We don't know. I see people asking. It looked to us like Chrysler was cramps because he came back in and it was kind of toasty down there. I don't know. As you mentioned, we're not going to know.
Week one is always the test of hydration for all these guys. You go to high school games, you go to college games, you see it throughout the day, and it is hot, right? But it's their first time of playing this many snaps at this kind of pace. And it's always a test of cramps are always going to happen this first week.
Boy, there were a lot of them. St. Dom's coming in like he hasn't read a bit of coverage, whereas Desmond Schuster, we've covered that for 3 months, Dom. Sorry, man. He
has not been cleared to play. Desmond Schuster has not been cleared to play.
Yeah, probably shouldn't have been a jerk. I shouldn't have. At any rate, I thought that was Adams moving to right tackle was the one I kind of was like, oh, okay, because my whole thought process was Geske kicks out, Slaughter goes in. They kind of reshuffled it, which tells me maybe they're more comfortable with Slaughter at left guard than right guard. I don't know, or maybe they were more comfortable with Chrysler being the tackle. I thought that was probably.
Yeah, what else we got here, Isaac?
Yeah, another one that stood out, special teams. Last year was such a negative at times, but tonight didn't really stand out for bad reasons. I thought Hugh made some solid punts, so interested to hear what you guys have to say on the special teams.
I did see Brett Bielema and Robbie Disher walking off the field, and Brett had his arm around Robbie Disher, and all I could think about was like, boy, am I glad I called that guy. Because special teams was good. Yeah, sure.
Cross off the list.
Hugh Robertson, he punted well. We saw him do that at times. Like, I feel like the whole conversation, and when he wasn't good, it was not good. But I feel like the whole conversation around Hugh gets skewed to like 6 bad punts in a year, which were costly. Like, I'm not trying to say they weren't, but he was good. I thought the coverage. Toledo had some decisions to return kicks. I thought, I'm unsure why that would happen. And James Kreutz, the heat-seeking missile, Jeremy's man. Is.
I can't wait to I can't wait to clip that, GIF that, and put it in the position grades because, boy, was that fantastic. Joe, your mic is making some noises. Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait. Unhook that mic, Joey. Just take that thing out. I can't wait to look at James Kreutz because that dude just hits so dang hard. That was a lot of fun to watch. But yeah, we saw Hugh Robertson late in the season punt well. And for him, it wasn't about ability. It was about consistency. And I thought tonight we saw what we saw towards the end of last season, what we saw during the spring as well when we saw Hugh Robertson. and that was performed pretty well. Like 247-yard punts tonight. I just thought he was consistently good. And, man, I was in the north end zone saying, hey, Illinois needs to go score. They need to go score a touchdown here. I don't want to leave this up to a kicker. And I trust Caleb Griffin, but I just thought that they needed to score and then go for two and force Toledo to have to go down the field and score a touchdown. But Brett Bielema showed a lot of faith in him. The running back set it up to where they were able to get a 27, 28-yard field goal. And it was true, man. Caleb Griffin looked great hitting that field goal, and he was really good on kickoffs tonight. So, yeah, special teams certainly was a positive tonight. I thought they'd be better this year because I just thought Hugh Robertson had to improve a little bit. And I didn't think the return game took unnecessary risks. And, Isaiah Williams was able to catch his punts, which is always the most important thing.
You got me?
Yeah, you're good. You sound much better.
That is karma for picking on Dom if I've ever done it in my life. I deserve that. Special, like, that's what I thought. The return game, I couldn't hear for like 32% of what you said. They returned a little bit. I thought Pat Bryant came out, so we saw the next up would be Aiden Lawfrey. I think that was because Pat Bryant, it looked like he cramped at one point, and I'm wondering if they just wanted to take something else off of his plate. But yeah, I mean, special teams is good. I don't know if it's Blake Hayes' glory days good, but it's pretty good.
Yeah. Chase says, I have a lot more concerns after game one than I thought. We don't have anything to hang our hat on other than the quarterback, wide receivers, and special teams. This is where the small sample size plays in. I think their offensive line will get better. I think their defensive line is a strength. I think their defensive front is a strength. I just didn't think they played well tonight. I don't know if they were thinking they could dominate tonight or what it was, but they need improvement. But Terrence Jamison and Bart Miller should give you some confidence that group's going to get better. As you said, Joey, against Indiana, the offensive line wasn't very good last year, but that group needs chemistry. That group needs reps together. I would be concerned a little bit about depth with some injuries, but defensive line, like I expect Johnny Newton, Keith Randolph, Seth Coleman, and Gabe Atkins to play better.
Yeah, I think that'll all balance itself out. I think it'll be fine. Again, Indiana is such a perfect comp for this. I thought the secondary was going to be a concern after Indiana because Indiana had some really big plays. We thought the offensive line was going to be a concern. Like the reality, they had two first-time starters on the right side interior of their offensive line with Josh Cruz and Josh Geske. It takes time. Like I don't think that you can't hang your hat on that. I just think it's small sample size. And I get it. Like we've been waiting to see something for 8 months and like you want to react to everything. And that's what we're paid to do. And that's what like we do as fans when we're watching other things. Like I get it, but I do think that like there is a big jump.
We have a pretty big sample size of Seth Coleman, Gabe Atkins, Johnny Newton, and Keith Randolph. Right?
Johnny Newton still had moments tonight where you're like, oh yeah, that's right.
So Keith.
Yeah.
Keith had some good reps. It just wasn't consistent quite enough. Dan, did you like the fourth down carry call for McCray? I didn't like going for it or the play call. I don't mind going for it. That was a long field goal, and I think you should be able to gain a yard if you're Illinois against Toledo. And he didn't because I don't need to call out the kid, but Josh Geske just missed his block. The nose guard went through, and it wasn't Josh McCray's fault. Josh McCray got tackled by a 300-pound man. Like, I'm not going to blame the guy for that. The play call, I could have issues with. I thought Luke Altmyer deserved some trust to make a play there. As we saw later, he made a nice fourth down throw. And then Dan follows up, and if McCray doesn't get more dependable, getting the tough yards in the next couple games, any chance we see Fagan. I will let Joey Wagner answer that one because he was all game saying Caden Fagan.
I mean, I think there's a level of excitement, but I'm not ready to turn the page on Josh McCray he still had 541 yards as a true freshman. It could be okay. I mean, I do wonder, right? Because like this whole thing is supposed to be by committee. If half of your committee is struggling to do that, then I don't know. But I think Josh McCray will be okay. As you mentioned, the 4th and 1 was not great. Yeah, it didn't work out. But I think I don't know. I don't think so because I think there's still a lot of trust in Josh McCray.
Yeah, I see a comment about the Illinois defensive front maybe didn't look as good because they were playing contain. I'm not concerned about the sacks. Like I thought they actually put some pressure on Finn at times. I was concerned about the run stopping. Like the fact that they were getting yards consistently on first down, and that wasn't Finn. That was their running backs like Stewart and their big back. I forget his name. Like they were
the kid from Maryland.
Yeah, getting consistent yards on first down to where they would get to 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3, and it's just hard to contain Finn at that point. So that was my concern. I'm not concerned about, they need this many sacks per game. You just need to contain, you need pressure, but the fact that they were getting beat up front, like just physically, was the concern there. And then losing contain of Finn. Like I think Brett Bielema was pretty disappointed in his outside linebackers today.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. Penny Boone is the big back transfer from Maryland. That was why it was those first yards where they would just grind through 5 or 6 yards, or those first downs they'd grind through 5 or 6 yards. That just wasn't what we thought. I do think, similar to what we talked about the interior of the offensive line, got used to seeing Calvin Avery play pretty good football at nose. I just think that there's going to be some growing there, but I think the defensive line will be fine. I think that defensive front is still really talented. That just didn't play its best game.
M. Noose, this is the game Illinois would lose in previous years.
Brett Bielema said it on the radio. He implied it. I don't know if he directly said it, but yeah, they lost this in 21. They lost this twice. They lost this to UTSA, and they lost it when they came back and lost to Rutgers after they beat Penn State on the road. They've lost this game before in the Brett Bielema tenure. They lost it last year against Indiana. Now, they might still lose one this year like this, right? That's still very much on the table. But there is an incremental sign of growth there.
Fedigator, why do you think we didn't see Fagan? He's a freshman. I don't think they trust him yet. You're going to give a freshman his first carry in a tight game. It's just rare to see that. It's why we didn't see Jordan Anderson last year. We should have seen him in Northwestern. But it's why we didn't see him when he was traveling with the team, even though they could have used a goal line back. It's just they got to have trust. And that's why, again, a team like an FCS opponent is so valuable. You can get some of those guys, those reps, just to get the first Big Ten hit. I just don't think you want to be giving that to Caden Fagan on the goal line or on a 4th and 1 or whatever it is. I think they want to work him into a different situation.
I do think in an alternative universe, instead of 2 sacks to end that drive before the Toledo final scoring drive, Illinois goes down and gets some points. I do wonder if that would have put them at a 2-score game, right? They go down and get some points on that. I do wonder if you would have tried to churn some out with Caden Fagan. But yeah, I don't. He's
now with Love and McCray, 2 guys who have done it, taken those hits, and they trust. It's one of the biggest things of coaching staffs you'll learn. I know everyone see Malik Elzy tonight. They trust Pat Bryant. That's why he plays. Not that they don't think Malik Elzy is going to be good. The new toy everybody wants to see. That's why Pat Bryant was more important coming into the season than Malik Elzy, because he's played a lot. The coaching staff trusts him. He knows what he's doing out there. You get under these bright lights, it's different, man. That's why they trusted Caleb Griffin to do it. And I think Caleb Griffin was pushed by David Alano, and David Alano might have had a better training camp.
Caleb Griffin said that. Caleb Griffin said he didn't have his best training camp. I mean, he straight up said that today.
But Caleb Griffin has kicked in big moments in big games, and I think that's what they trust. One more before we get out of here. Fedigator, good win, top 3 concerns. Defensive discipline, yep. That's a big issue after tonight. I expect them to correct that. Brett Bielema usually did a pretty good job last year, cutting out the penalties towards the end of the year. O-line, yeah, I want to see Kreutz and Geske play better next game. I'll have to watch the film to see the other guys. 90% of Lunny's play calling. I tell you what, Lunny's opening script was phenomenal. It was a lot of play action, a lot of different misdirection, and Luke Altmyer delivering the ball with confidence and accuracy. That was phenomenal after that. Then penalties kind of disrupted them. They just didn't have the ball very much. What was it, 3 drives in the first half?
Yeah, after they had that 5-minute possession to start, and then I think you had the stat. It was 17-6 the rest of the first half.
Yeah, so he just didn't have the ball very long, and one of those drives was just all those penalties that really hurt them. Second half, I thought he was pretty good. The 4th and 1 call is probably the big one. That
the 2-point conversion.
2-point conversion. It's something sitting in my mind. Was that meant to be a lateral?
I mean, it looked like it.
Casey Washington looked like he had a little kind of seam there to potentially go in for the 2-point conversion, which would have made a big difference in that 4th quarter, by the way.
I'm sure there's probably also there was a 4-down. Illinois was clearly in 4-down mode, and it was the 3rd down was kind of a little one of those not awkward pitches, but those little pitches that went nowhere that set up a little bit of a longer 4th down. Here's the thing, Luke Altmyer was comfortable. Barry Lunny's play calling also has like some effect on Luke Altmyer, who had a pretty good game. I think there were some plays. Every game there's plays, but that's kind of becoming the bingo board here.
Offense scored 30 points. No, I guess, Miles Scott had to pick 6 there, but your offense really helped you win this game. So, I mean, Luke Altmyer played a big role in that, but isn't Barry Lunny a big part of Luke Altmyer in calling kind of the plays he wants? So, man, there's some plays you want back, I'm sure, but I don't know. There's a couple plays that I think every offensive coordinator, you can go back and look at the game plan and say those were issues. I thought Barry was fine today, to be honest with you. I didn't have a huge issue with 90%. 90%'s way overstating it.
That's a little steep for me. There was one that fourth down, that 4th and 1. I think there were 3 straight runs. I'd have to go back and look at that. That was probably like to trust Luke, but that was early in the game, right? That was the first half. I have somewhere in my mess of notes. Like, I don't know that he probably does that again in the 4th quarter, right? Or late in the 3rd quarter. So I think you could probably circle that and say, okay, maybe you put it in Luke's hands for one of those. But also you've got Josh McCray, and you believe in running the football, and you believe in being an offensive line. I understand how he got there. I think you could probably circle those 3, though.
Can I go back to those 2 plays? I think I should be able to count on my center and guard to make blocks.
Yeah, 100%.
Like your 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, just make a block. Put a body on somebody. You don't even have to win the rep. Just put a body on somebody. They had 2 whiffs. They had 2 whiffs on that, and that can't happen. That has to be your identity. I understand it didn't work. I would have done something different on the 4th down, but the 3rd down play, I'm like, no, run it up the gut. You should be able to gain a yard against Toledo, and they weren't able to. So offensive line's got to get better from that. I'm sure Bart Miller will be addressing that this week.
Indiana. I do. Hold on. There's one before we get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts on the clock mismanagement at the end of the game, giving them a chance to win it. Brett Bielema explained it. There were 8 seconds. He called a timeout. It was 3rd down. If it's a botched snap, you can pounce on it, fall on it, call a timeout, and get the chance. His logic there was to give yourself room for error. I mean, I get it. I get if you're watching it, you worry about them taking a kickback or whatever the case, but you sure as heck, I think, would rather have that if there's a botched snap on that. But that was Brett Bielema's logic with it.
At the end of the day, Joey, this was very close to being a bad week 1 loss. Even with Toledo, MAC champ, respect him. I said Illinois needed to play its B game today. They probably got away with their C game and got away with a victory here because of Miles Scott big play, Luke Altmyer's big play. They're a very, very thin line of pulling out this win tonight. So there's certainly a lot of things they need to address in the next week before they head to Kansas.
100% with you. Can we do a quick 3 stars? 3 stars of the game?
Sure.
We'll make this hockey style. I know you're not a big hockey guy, but number 1 is Luke Altmyer. I don't know, hot take. Then you got to put Miles Scott. Like, that play changed the whole tenor of the game. Do you go Pat Bryant, or do you go – I think it's got to be Pat Bryant, even though Caleb Griffin, it feels weird leaving him off there.
I mean, that Casey Washington play was –
Yeah. Casey had some – to be honest, that was one of the penalties. Remember Luke Altmyer found Casey on the Toledo sideline, and it was called back for something of sort. That –
Yeah, I mean, we want to pick apart some Barry Lunny plays. Like, let's give him credit. Like, that Pat Bryant first touchdown, phenomenal play call.
Yeah, Casey. It was Tip Ryman had holding. It was that second drive. It was Tip Ryman holding, false start. The holding came after Casey Washington had an 11-yard. Casey Washington was good. He was good today.
Yeah. Do we go opponents in here? Because DeQuan Finn certainly should be a part of that as well. He's good, man. Like, I'm not impressed. I'm not overly impressed with him as a passer, but I mean, in the MAC, that'll get it done. But dude's a gamer. Dude makes plays. He
was fun to watch. I love the AJ Bush comp. I mean, I thought that was one of your better comps. Somebody I know you're not known for comps, but that was.
I love my comps. What's the Miles Scott comp? I don't have a comp for him. It's a hell of a story.
The story is Kirby Joseph and Kendall Smith in terms of the road, even though Miles Scott his road was much less paved. But physically, he's not as big as those guys. I mean, I think the story fits, right? Like, I think that those two would be the comp.
Yeah, and just the playmakers they can find for that position. I mean, Fedge obviously was a walk-on, turned into a hell of a player, but he was at D2. Miles Scott walked on here as a prep, school guy, coming on and doing what he did to make that play was just a game changer for Illinois. All right, we're going to wrap it up because it's almost 12:30 on this Sunday morning as we're recording this. For Joey Wagner, I'm Jeremy Werner. Thanks to our guy Isaac Ambrose for producing this tonight. Thank you to the 250 plus that were on this throughout the entire time. We love interacting with you guys. And Joey, there's a lot of issues to address, but it's a lot easier to do that, I think, when you get a win and you're 1-0. So 1/6 of the way to a bowl game for Illinois. I know that's not the goal, but if they would have started 0-1, as you said, going to Kansas, hosting Penn State, who looked pretty good today, that would have been a difficult start.
Would have been a tough start for – look, I mean, before we go, there's a lot of excitement around this team, but there's still a hint of when is that football going to get pulled? Like, when is Lucy going to pull the football? Because I think people are, like, kind of scared to jump fully. There's a lot of people fully on board, but I do think there's some people who are a little scared to jump fully on board. And
so a lot of people left the game when it was 19-7. I get it. I get it. Better things to do on a Saturday night maybe than watch Illinois lose to Toledo. But, yeah, I don't think tonight, maybe this is the wrap it all up, because tonight did not get anyone to buy in to this team, being like the Big Ten West favorite, right? I don't know if any Big Ten West team felt great about this initial week, which kind of what we expected from the Big Ten West. And Illinois certainly played one of the tougher opponents. Purdue did, and they lost today, right? Illinois gets away with a win. So I don't think anybody's thinking, oh, this is definitely a team that's going to break through. But even if they would have lost, I would have said, I can't write a column writing off this team because I saw what happened last year after Indiana. And there's so many chances to be a good team. But if you think they can reach the heights of what they want, I mean, beating Toledo is a part of that. If you want to win 9-10 games, whatever it is, beating Toledo is a part of that. So you find a way to get out of it. You survive the next day. And if you can make the jump from week 1 to week 2, like Brett Bielema says you can, you feel pretty good if you get through Kansas 2-0 with squeaking out a win over Toledo. Anyway, you got it.
Yeah, and then Champaign probably feels pretty good with Penn State in town for big noon kickoff.
Yeah. A win is a win is a win. I think D. Brown said that at one point. For Joey Wagner, for Isaac Ambrose, I'm Jeremy Werner. Thank you for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Give us a follow, rating, review, wherever you get podcasts. For all of you watching on YouTube, before you get out of here, hit the like button, subscribe to us, hit the notifications bell as well. We appreciate all you guys hanging out with us late night. We got plenty more coming. It's going to be late night for us writing. So stay tuned to everything at Illini Inquirer. Plus, you can get 50% off a VIP membership if you're not a VIP member right now. And we'll have some recruiting scoop coming out of this weekend as well. Everybody have a great night. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer podcast.